Good morning, everybody. I'm Tom Wood. I am the Western Territory Manager for the Organisan Corporation. We're based out of a few southern states. The manufacturing facility is located just outside of Lafayette, Louisiana, in the metropolis of Broussard. Corporate headquarters are in the great state of Georgia, and I reside in eastern Idaho. I'm a fourth generation farmer there. I still actively farm. We still farm part of what my great-grandfather homesteaded in 1906. We're going to discuss today an interesting compound called Chitosan. I stumbled into this completely by accident or divine intervention, however you want to view this. Well, back up for a second. I first got introduced to the microbial idea of farming, which is kind of segued or matured into regenerative agriculture now, if you will. In 2012, I accidentally stumbled into a meeting that blew my mind. I realize now, looking back, that I was kind of pre-wired. I think differently. I had a predisposition for some of this stuff. We had started integrating some of these microbial practices on our own farm for a couple of years, and then in 2014 we had an interesting weather event happen in pretty much all of southern Idaho that we got so much rain that summer that we actually felt like true ice staters for once. Everybody talk, Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, and Idaho, we're the ice state everybody forgets about. It rained so much that it caused a lot of problems in our cereal grain production. We're in an area where there really is not much, very little corn silage, that's about it. Poverty grass, wheat, barley is pretty much our mainstays. Potatoes, all the stereotypes you hear about Idaho, they're true. You go to a Five Guys restaurant and you see that name on the board from these. I get one of these pictures probably once a week. Now, do you know these guys? Yes, they're all my neighbors. That stuff, all those potatoes come from my immediate area there. But in the summer of 2014, by the time we got into harvest, quickly realized that we had a serious problem with DON, vomitoxin, deoxynivalenol, head blight, whatever your word is for this, it's the same thing. It's caused by one or two organisms, Fusarium graminearum and Fusarium culmorum. Those organisms produce a secondary metabolite called deoxynivalenol, or DON for short. The DON levels that fall were through the roof. I know of a farmer who had to dig a hole and dump his barley crop in the hole because nobody would touch it. Once the DON levels get so high, you can't do. The nickname for it is vomitoxin, because if you force feed this onto hogs, they literally will vomit from this toxin when they try to consume this. I got really intrigued that winter. Where in the world did this organism come from? Where did this disease outbreak come from? Because it was a very secondary, you'd hear about it once in a while, but none of us had ever dealt with this before. And in my research of these fusariums that winter, I came across a research article that just opened up Pandora's box for me, and the rabbit hole was wide open, and I jumped in with both feet because I found a research article talking about this compound called Chitosan and how effective this compound is against these two fusariums in particular. And I did what most farmers do in that situation. I picked up the phone and started calling every agronomist that I knew had ever worked with, and I had worked with a lot of them because my brother and I owned a custom application business at the time. We kind of specialized with the potato industry. We would mark out rows in the springtime, put in the pop-up fertilizer, all of the chemistries, the fungicides, insecticides, nematicides, anything basically the farmer didn't want to deal with or have his crowd deal with, we got to put in. In the summertime, I would head for hay balers, rogators. My brother is a crop duster, still is a crop duster. My dad started crop dusting in 1985. So I grew up in an environment of using and applying very hard chemistries. That was what I knew. In the fall, my brother and I would then hook on to the fumigation rigs. He did most of the Metam products, and I would do the 1,3-D, the Telone products. And it was, side note, interesting that fall too, we realized that most of our customers that we fumigated for were the ones that had the worst vomitoxin infection in this. Maybe back on track, I called all these agronomists, all the field guys, and have you ever heard of this Chitosan? Do you know? No, never heard of it. Snake oil, if it was this good, everybody'd have a product with this active in it. Nope, never heard of it. And that wasn't, something sparked in my brain. I just kept digging on this. I kept digging. There you will find, please go Google this. Don't take my word for anything I tell you today, because I might be up here completely lying to you all. Please go do your own Googling on this. There is thousands of research papers that have been written on this compound at this point in time. So we, the next spring, I knew the compound. I came at this a little bit backwards from what most people do. We show up at your farm and I tell you about this product that has this compound in it. I found the compound and was now looking for the product. And we brought some stuff onto our own farm in 2015. Didn't really have much for success with it. Through divine intervention again, I can't explain it any other way. My phone number wound up in the hands of our president and CEO of the Organisan Corporation. Mr. Borden called me at home one night about 8 o'clock. We talked until midnight. He proceeded to forward me more research papers that I was surprised I hadn't found all of them by now. So in 2016, we brought this product to Idaho to start playing with. At the time, the company was kind of focused in the southeast. This is where it was born, bred, started from, came up from. They didn't have a lot of exposure in the west, didn't have a whole lot of advice to tell us on what crops for what timing, what rates, so we just went to work figuring this out. One thing to another, we had a series of things happen. Now, we took our own farm. We took 4 fields, split them in half. We just went out in the springtime and applied 1 pint per acre broadcast before we did anything else that spring. And then we saw no difference all summer. There was nothing visual, tiller counts, kernel counts. I couldn't really see anything different in there. Thank goodness for yield monitors, or we might have missed this, and I probably wouldn't be standing before you all today, that we had anywhere from a 7 bushel to the acre increase up to a 21 bushel to the acre increase between our tests and our checks. At that point, the hook was set and just reel me in. From there, it just went to figuring out where do we apply this? How? What time? We knew this worked, and over the course of time, we started to map this out. In 2018, I believe it was, Mark Nichols called me on the phone and asked me if I wanted a job here, and I told him no. And then I told him I'll think about it, we'll pray about it, and a week later I called him back and told him that if you're serious about the offer, I'm serious about accepting it. At that point in time, the timing was just right for this. I was really looking to get out of the application business. I had done this for so long, and I think I probably had gotten to a threshold of toxicity levels maybe. There was a few chemistries that we worked with on a regular basis that I just couldn't take the exposure anymore. They just would dilate my pupils and give me a headache when they dropped off the boxes. So I stepped away from the application business, went to work for these guys in July of 2018, and here we are. It's ironic that the catchphrase, the believe the unbelievable, really does happen here more often than not. There's a lot of this stuff, the first time that you apply this, use this on your farm, I can't always explain why it did what it did to you. You sometimes have to take a leap of faith here and be willing to accept and believe the unbelievable. So sometimes you grow to expect, sometimes you have to learn you will believe the unbelievable. Results may vary. I'm not going to guarantee you success with this. We're dealing with a natural process here. As we go through this today, I hope that I'm clear in explaining, y'all get an idea of how this system works in nature. All we're doing is our science team has figured out how to refine a product down that we interject ourselves into a natural process that happens in nature, and all we're doing is making the outcome of this process that happens more predictable, more repeatable. Sometimes when the results vary, it can be extremely dramatic though. This photo here is of a farm in southern Texas that was treating for nematodes in a tree orchard. We're having good numbers, good success rate with the nematode suppression. And then they had a little frost event happen in Texas. Sometimes things will happen here that we weren't expecting. Keep your mind open, keep your eyes open, be willing to accept what happens, because the difference in the frost tolerance with this was remarkable. The farm supplied us with these photos of this farm. The NDVI image you can clearly see here where we were treated in the dark green. The photo was actually taken on the ground from Mr. Nichols. He just happened to be there a week, 2 weeks after this happened, to the line. This was a drip irrigation application. They had this broke out in test blocks for treated versus untreated, pulling nematode assays on each one to see what we did. Literally from one row to the next. It was ridiculous, the difference in this. Again, it was unbelievable. Full harvest on the side that we were treating on. Less than, it was pretty devastating for them on the sides that took the full brunt of the frost. Albert Einstein, we cannot solve our problems with the same line of thinking we used when we created them. We have, post-World War II, the green era, the chemistry era here has done a lot. We have come a long ways in agriculture with this. As far as crop production, yields, the increase that we have had. The part that we don't get told in commercial agriculture, though, is that more times than not, anytime you have an action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. There's a side effect that happens to a lot of these applications that we have made over the years that we weren't aware of. Nobody warned us that this was going to happen. We don't necessarily realize that there was a connection of dots between our underlying problems here, that the solution for this problem created the next problem, and vice versa. They now give us a solution in a jug for this problem, but it created this problem. And this continues in a downward spiral for us. This is kind of I refer to this as reductionist agriculture. The industry has done a fantastic job of breaking every one of these problems into an individual compartment and then supplying us with an individual product for this individual problem. And as long as you divide and conquer, keep all of these separate, it's really tough to connect the dots through all of this. I'd like to use the term holistic management, W-H-O-L-E, istic, that we have to be aware, we have to start thinking about managing our farms as the whole. The entire thing, that everything that we do and that we put in, there's an outcome that's going to come from this. And when you start to realize that your nematode application, we're trying to solve this problem with this product, might actually be causing our white mold problem over here. There's an underlying connection between all of these that we'll get into here in a minute. So chitosan is this magical compound that I have just been describing to you. So what is it? Where does it come from? What does it do? How does it work? Why should I use it on my farm? So what does it do? One of the greatest things about this that we so overlook in agriculture is the triggering of this SAR and SIR response in our plants. Pre-inoculizing, if you will, we're ramping up the self-defense mechanism in our plants. Chitosan has this ability to flip the trigger to get your plant to ramp up its own self-defenses before anything shows up there. It has some very strong fungicidal properties to it, bacterial side, viral side, insecticide. Don't start thinking it's insecticide. I'm going to make a little cursory note here, because when we think of an insecticide, there's a bug, there's an adult bug in our field and we want it dead now. We don't work that way. That's not the way nature works. That's not the natural process in this. This is far more effective as a life cycle interrupter. We're very effective at interrupting egg lays in there. We're effective at interrupting instar developments between the insects. But if you call me and tell me that you're being overrun with aphids, whatever your insect is, that's not where we fit. We're way behind. We should have been on well before now. We're far more effective at keeping insects out of your field, the preventative that this will bring to you. The old saying, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure, absolutely applies in this scenario here. Microbial stimulant. This is another one that weren't really looking for this outcome. As time goes on, we're becoming more and more cognizant all the time of the powerful activity that this has as a microbial stimulant. We'll get into way more detail on this here in a minute here. Stomatal conductance, which translates into transpiration control. It'll work to help increase the photosynthetic rate, which increases just plant energy overall, sugar production. Cold tolerance, as I showed you in the first slide, there's some interesting attributes to this for increasing cold tolerance. Wetting and sticking, fantastic. There's a reason that this product started with an adjuvant in the adjuvant realm and an adjuvant label. This is one of the most fantastic adjuvant stickers, spreader stickers that you will ever find on the marketplace. And a food preservative. I got some slides, some pictures here at the end that kind of demonstrate some fun little things with this as far as preservative. So we'll go through this, kind of break this down quickly, each aspect of this, how it works, what the kind of the mode of action is of this, so you kind of understand how this system all starts to play in here. As a fungicide, one of the first things that happens, again, this binds to the fungal receptor on the leaf surface. And you may or may not have heard before that your plants have a fungal receptor on the leaf, and your plants have an insect receptor on the leaf. It's the same receptor. All that is a chitin receptor on the leaf. There's three things that you're going to hear me talk about a lot today: chitin, chitosan, chitinase. Chitin is the second most common polymer in the universe, only behind cellulose. Everything in nature with an exoskeleton contains a chitin construction to it. It's one of nature's building blocks. Chitosan is a refined form of chitin. We're basically making that product more predictable, more bioavailable, more quickly available in the environment. And the chitinase is the enzyme. As we all know, anything that ends in ase is usually an enzyme in nature. Enzymes put things together, enzymes tear things apart. The chitinase enzyme tears apart chitin and chitosan. And this is kind of where some of the magic happens with this, is through this chitinase production. We need a microbial community to get the full benefit out of this. It's your microbe, your beneficial microbes that produce a lot of this chitinase. So with the fungicide, first thing we do is trigger this SAR-SUR response again. We trip that receptor on the plant leaf and get this plant's own self-defense mechanisms moving up. This will work to permeate the cell structure of fungi. And it's interesting between this because just about down the line between what we term a pathogen and what we term a beneficial, the good Lord Mother Nature made a distinction in this with the amount of chitin that's in the cell wall construction between these organisms and the cell permeability, how wet it is inside this cell. We're very effective at tearing apart the chitin construction in the cell walls of the pathogens. We actually become a food source for the beneficials. We give them something to eat and we give them a job to do. When they're in the presence of the chitin, the chitosan, they know to start producing this chitinase enzyme. It's just divine intelligence in these microbes. Nobody told them this is what their job is. Nobody told them to pack a lunch. This is what you're doing at the mine today. They just know. We use the term, instinct. Animals are born with instincts. The microbial realm is born instinctually knowing what to do in the presence of chitin and chitosan. A lot of the beneficials within the fungal realm, trichoderma, fantastic. Trichoderma harzianum is one of the most prolific chitinase producers that science has been able to identify yet. Bavaria bassiana, this is a really easy one to deal with. This is a spore former. It survives well through application processes. And what bassiana brings to the table, if you start with one organism, this gets into a little bit of the prescriptive microorganisms, if you will. Bavaria bassiana, though, is right up there in the top of the list, in my opinion. And what we do with this, when we supply the bassiana with this chitosan food source, you might have to believe the unbelievable when you try this combination. As a bacterial side, again, we trigger the SAR-SUR response in this. This reaction isn't as pronounced or as strong as the fungal side of this. There's actually an attraction that'll happen with the pathogenic fungi having that chitin construction within them. The old chitin mother parent material inside there, when we spray the chitosan on it, there's actually an attraction that happens through the cell membrane, through the cell wall membrane in there. They try to come back together. And there's enough of a pull there that it will actually start to tear the inner cell membrane, and that pathogen will actually bleed out, cell lysis. It will actually, with bacteria, it's a slower reaction that happens. Basically, it interferes at that point of the bacteria dividing. That there's a point of interference that happens there where 1/2 of the new organism now, that new cell isn't complete. It didn't close off on the end, so half of this will die pretty quickly. The other side of this, they call it cell morphology. It'll actually kind of work to deform the side of that one there, but it's going to survive longer. So anyway, it's slower as a bacterial side than it is as a fungicide. Can still be very effective this way. How many times have you ever, show of hands, how many of you ever made a bacterial side application on your fields? How many of you made a fungicide application on your fields? Can't really go to town and buy a bacterial side because the mode of action is so much different between these. There is so many beneficials in the bacterial realm. Bacillus, kind of like we get bored with bacillus after a while. Everything's bacillus. There's a reason why. They're spore forming, they're easy to deal with. Trichoderma, there's so many, there's several trichodermas in this realm that are so beneficial with this, with the addition of the chitosan. The Pseudomonas, that's what I was looking for. Pseudomonas fluorescens. Sweetheart for me, because in my region, take all. If you're a dryland farmer in the Pacific Northwest, you're keenly aware, you know all about take all. Pseudomonas fluorescens single-handedly will take apart this organism that causes take all in cereal grains. A viral side. How many of you ever sprayed a viral side before? Nobody. We all just came through COVID, and anybody here obviously survived. There's not much you can do for a virus, right? You get a cold sore, what do you do to cure it? Time. You can go buy Carmex, you can put some Carmex on it. I don't know if it helps, but it does make it really bright and shiny, and it makes sure everybody notices that you have this. Other than that, not much you can do for a viral side. It's interesting on this, so there is research, if you go look this up, research back in the 1960s though, that they identified zinc. Zinc will denature the protein coat of viruses. Not a lot of money in selling zinc, so we don't hear a lot about zinc applications for any of this. In us, in plants, in the animal kingdom, whatever it is, zinc denatures the protein coat of viruses. Again, this triggers the SARS response. So we're ramped up already. That plant's already cranking up here when something shows up. We don't have this delay lag that something infected us and now we're running behind trying to catch this. We're already full bore here when a virus does show up. This is a big deal for us in Idaho with potato production. Where I farm, I'm right on the cusp. You go east of me a couple miles, it's everything seed production from there to the Wyoming line. Everything west, south is all commercial production. In potato seed production, PVX, PVY, potato virus Y, big deal, big problem. If you think your mosaics, wheat streak mosaic, things like that, these viral infections, we can do a lot to help your plant stave this off. I have a situation with a potato seed farmer that, long story short, kind of out of desperation, they had nothing left to lose at this point. They were going to be put out of the seed production business. They were down to one small pivot was all they were doing. We came in, it's been 4 or 5 years ago now, split the pivot in half. Grower standards the same on the entire pivot. On one half of it, we put down 1 pint per acre of O2YS through the airplane, and we did this 2 applications about 21 days apart. When those potatoes were sent to Hawaii by Idaho Crop Improvement for the grow outs, when they got the results back, the side that we did not treat, the PVY number had gotten so big, crop improvement would not tag those for seed. They had to go to the warehouse. The side that we had treated on, the PVY number, depending if you ask the farm manager or the farm agronomist, either stayed the same as the generation they planted or actually went down a little bit from the generation they planted. And that never happens. PVY is just all you can do is try to slow the burn. You can't reverse it. Anybody you talk to will tell you all you can do is try to slow the burn. And we actually stopped the burn, and that farm has been a very, very loyal user now for many years. So, nematicide, insecticide. I already touched on the insecticide portion of this. The mode of action between these two is very similar though. Nematicide is one of my favorite properties to talk about with this. We are so effective as a nematicide, we have actually been granted, we have an EPA registered nematode product called Nemasan. And the EPA doesn't just hand these puppies out just because you put in an application form and wrote please at the bottom. Again, we're gonna trigger this SAR-SUR response. The chitinase production, this is where your beneficial microbes really start to come into play here now. Again, the chitin-chitosan exposure on these microbes triggers the chitinase enzyme expression. That enzyme breaks down the chitin and chitosan that it finds in nature. If you look under a microscope, one of the first shortcut cheats that you're looking for in nematode identification, if you see the horn they kind of look like a unicorn. You see the horn sticking out the front there, that's actually a stylet tooth that they use to penetrate into that. Guess what that's made of? Chitin. The enzyme starts to degrade the mouth parts, in some cases the esophageal tract of many of these nematodes. My favorite class of nematodes to go after is anything with cyst in the name. Cereal cyst nematode, which is an issue for cereal grain production in Idaho. Soybean cyst nematodes. What happens with this is the female reaches sexual maturity. She will contain 200, 500 eggs within her. She will lay a few eggs towards the end of her lifespan, but she basically turns into a chitin cyst and encompasses all of these eggs. All we have to do is put a microscopic pinhole through that cyst and we just wiped out that entire generation. We can move the assay numbers of cyst-type nematodes very rapidly. We had some, I don't know if you want to say frustrations, but some confusion maybe early on. Couldn't understand why over here we would have huge response, like we were heroes, and over here we were less than perfect. I stumbled into, again, maybe divine intervention, something. I met a nematologist at a conference one time who had experience with this compound. And I was asking him about this, seeing he was the expert here, and he explained to me this all has to do with the egg lays. If the nematodes lay eggs in a line, we can affect those individual eggs. Again, the cyst nematode, all we do is penetrate that cyst, we wiped out that entire next generation. When we start getting into the root knots in particular, they lay eggs in a cluster, in a pile. So suddenly we realize that we have to constantly burn through this pile of eggs. The first application, we get the outside of these. The next step, we have to keep burning our way with this chitinase enzyme through this pile of egg lays. So we have enough experience in the field with this now that show us your assay, we can look and see what nematodes, are they Chetwoody, spiral, stunt, dagger, we know. And based on what nematodes are pestering you, there's some additions. Fulvic acid sometimes has shown a big help in increasing our efficacy with this. But nematode control with this, if you have never looked for if you don't have soybean cyst nematodes, show me your assay that shows me you don't have them. Do you not have them because you've never looked for them? I would encourage everybody in the soybean production side of stuff here today to do a nematode assay. One of my kind of quick cheats on this is white mold a concern for you in your soybeans. Is sclerotinia a concern for you? Is botrytis a concern for you? I mentioned at the beginning of this that there's an interconnection between a lot of these, that this solution caused this problem over here. This is one of these situations. Sclerotinia, anything that survives in a sclerotia form in the soil, particularly in the off season, you want to guess what that sclerotia is composed of? Chitin. So we can be treating for nematodes and we're actually having a big effect on overall plant health because we're reducing that sclerotia in the soil. If you wait until white mold is ravaging your field, we can help with that. But again, the prevention versus the cure. The ounce of prevention is so much easier, better than the pound of cure is. So we've seen this start to occur in Idaho now, that we're hypersensitive to the nematode populations with potatoes because they're affecting what we're needing to sell. So the first unsightly bump you have there, you can't have that. There's some of these. There's an area there in eastern Idaho where the stubby root knot is infected with the tobacco rattle virus. And if they're infected with that, they cause a condition called corky ring spot. You are allowed 2% corky ring spot in your samples to be able to move them on the market. Any more than that, processors don't even want these because it will cause unsightly rings and dark spots in your potatoes when you try to fry them or chip them. Very sensitive. But we see situations with farmers where they start treating the nematodes. Eventually they move into the fumigation, and that works for a while. And then eventually they move into heavier fumigation, higher rates of fumigation. After a few fumigations, suddenly they have to spray for white mold. They've never sprayed for white mold on the farm, and all of a sudden in 1 year, they went from last year spraying nothing. This year it took 3 applications of Endura to take care of the white mold infestation. Again, reductionist agriculture versus holistic. Sometimes your solution causes your next problem. As a plant elicitor, this is maybe one of the greatest expressions that we will see in the field, and maybe one of the hardest to try to quantify what all's going on, because we affect the plant metabolism in so many different aspects. Just green up, stem rigidity, petiole strength increases. Chitosan has a lot of hormonal properties to it, which is kind of hard to quantify, that at this rate causes this response. But we know it. It's well known, researched. Again, go do some of your own research on this. Do not believe a word I say at face value. Go check this out. The plant eliciting properties of this are something really, really to pay attention to. A nutrient and mineral chelator. This is good and bad. There's some properties to this. So very cationic molecule here, very positively charged. Pretty tough to find a positive charge in nature. Everything, plant, soil, pretty much dominated ionic charges. It's all negative there. So with an application of the chitosan, there's actually an electrostatic bond that will happen between the chitosan and the plant. Anything that you were able to mix us with in the spray tank also benefits from that bond. There was a doctorate study funded a few years ago in the United Kingdom where they were looking at increasing the efficacy of strobilurin chemistries. In this study, they went into a greenhouse, and on one side of the greenhouse, they applied a strobilurin all by itself. On the other side of the greenhouse, they added just a generic chitosan they got for testing purposes with their strobilurin. Let everything dry, and then turned on the sprinklers, and they gave it in the study. They call it simulated rainfall, 10 inches. They came back through and pulled leaves off each side, and through spectronomy analysis, looked at how much of the strobilurin chemistry was left on the leaf surface. The strobi by itself had less than 10% retention still on the leaf surface. Where the chitosan was mixed with this, they had greater than 90% retention still on the leaf surface. So again, there's a reason why this company started in the adjuvant realm to begin with. This is it's a fantastic adjuvant spreader sticker. Dr. Blanchard, in his development through the years, Andre had a lot of experience with chitosan in completely unrelated realms. He knows this stuff upside down, inside out. His initial experience with this came out of the well drilling industry. There's a big gap that the chitosan fills in that. Through his understanding of this molecule and how to manipulate this and how to get the most benefit out of this, he had learned there's some benefits to some additions in this. One, in the O2YS, you'll notice, is yucca. Yucca is a sugar. It's a microbial food source on its own. It's slick as snot. It is a spreader. It just, yeah, a little bit like ice. So now you combine a spreader with an electrostatic sticker. We now cover the entire leaf surface and glue it on there. We've done testing. We have seen this moves translaminar, this will move xylem, this will move phloem. Anything that it did mix with in the spray tank, I'm not going to tell you that we're going to move calcium as effectively through the phloem as it does xylem, but we're going to move calcium. It does happen. Zinc's an interesting one. There's been studies done where they went in and tarped off half of trees, just tarped off one side of them, came in with an O2YS zinc combination in this, sprayed the other half of the tree. The point of this study that was being done was to see, is it possible to translocate zinc from point A to point B? If so, how long does it take to do that? And in what concentrations will you find on the untreated side? They started, the plan was every hour, couple hours, they were going to pull leaf samples to see an hour after treatment in the first analysis, the zinc levels were stable between the treated and untreated side. In that amount of time, we had moved the zinc down, up, and was found in the leaves on the untreated side already. The downside to this is the cationic charge of this. In your spray tank, there is some things that you need to be keenly aware of we're not always compatible with. Kind of anything that ends in 8. Nitrate, sulfate, phosphate, big old negative charges hanging on those puppies. So we can have some tank mix compatibility issues with those products. So I just want you all to be aware of that before you dump it all in the tank and then call me on the phone, because it's happened and it's not comfortable for me. I lose sleep over this sometimes. I need to throw up sometimes. So please do a jar test before you mix us with some stuff for the first time. While we're on this little topic, side note of caveats, the other big one, major one, everybody needs to be aware of all the time is the pH. There's a characteristic of chitosan that as you move down the pH scale, becomes more soluble. As you move up the scale of pH, it starts to flocculate and make strings and chunks and blobs and globs. Again, please do a jar test because it causes me to lose sleep when you don't and you call me angry. So please check this. We need to have the pH modified before we go in the spray tank. We need this down and stable. I've had situations with potato farmers before where you get in a routine and you get kind of not focusing here. We mix all the time in the springtime with Admire Pro and Quadris. Do it all the time. Had a situation though where the farmer dumped in the imidacloprid, the strobilurin, the O2YS, and then the citric acid. And we wound up dumping that tank on the ground, had to take the air hoses and blow all of the lines out, soak all of the nozzles. It did not matter how much citric acid we put in, we could not bring that back from the point of cottage cheese. A lot of these reactions, once they happen, that boat sailed. It's too late. You can't bring this back. So you're keenly aware of pH. It's a big deal with this. Anti-transpirant. When we talked about the filming of the yucca and we talked about the sticking of the chitosan, one of the first things that happens is we put a film on that leaf surface. That's the initial blast that happens. Through the mode of the chitosan now, it closely enough resembles abscisic acid. Remember when I talked about the hormonal properties of this, and we just can't possibly figure out at this point everything it does. Science has identified, though, that through this stomatal conductance, what's going on is it closely enough resembles abscisic acid. The stomata thinks that it just got the signal to close. That's the initial knee jerk that happens. Through this SAR-SIR response that we trigger in the plant, one of the reactions that your plant is going to kick into is lignin production. If this is an insect attack, your plant's not sure what insect this is, what just happened, it just knows it's got to stay standing to make it to reproduction. So it will start to increase lignin production. For any alfalfa growers in the room, I realize I just gave you a case of heartburn. They're trying to make lignin a 4-letter word these days. Hang on, don't throw tomatoes yet. Again, when I talked about the increase in the stomatal, or in the petiole connection strength, that increase in lignification strengthens that connection between the alfalfa leaf and the stem. So now, out in the arid west, where there's times it's possible this time of year, you can put hay in a 4x4x8 1-ton bale in 4 days and it's too dry. We don't get dew, the wind blows all the time. You can't, this is why the steamers, this company in Utah building the steamers now is doing so well. We can, I'm not going to tell you that we're going to do as well as a Staley steamer. We will go to great lengths, though, to increase that connection. We'll keep your leaves on to help reduce your leaf shatter through the raking and baling processes, which then is going to increase your stem to leaf ratio, or leaf to stem. You're going to want, which is going to more than offset any increase in lignification that happened in the plant. I will take more leaves in the bale over less lignin varieties every day of the week, twice on Saturday. Try to take Sunday off, but twice on Saturday. Frost tolerance. Showed you this picture out of Texas when we started here. That closure of the stomata actually kind of helps regulate the plant now. Keeps the internal pressure up. We've seen these things on YouTube, on the internet, where you can put your bottle of water, your Pepsi, in the freezer and under pressure, and you take it out, crack the lid, bang, it instantly freezes. When it's under pressure, it can't expand. Your plant knows what to do in that situation. Again, it knows the temperature's coming down. It knows what nutrients need to go where. It knows what systemic processes it needs to fire. The chitosan has this ability to translocate nutrients within the plant. We become a trucker a little bit. We're going to help move things. And we're a C18 Caterpillar motor in this. We will pull a load. We can help move all of this. Another thing that happens, kind of a funny side, there is an organism called Pseudomonas syringae that is, it falls in this term they call, and it's an ice nucleating bacteria. This thing will actually start to form ice crystals at 34, 35 degrees. It's actually going to reduce your plant's frost tolerance. Funny thing, if you've ever been on a ski hill where they have to make their snow sometimes, they will include this bacteria in that vapor that they're throwing out because of its crystallization properties. We will work to kind of help keep that little puppy at bay. Wetting, sticking, we kind of touched on this already. Again, just the cationic nature of the chitosan in combination with the yucca spreads. Trust me, spill some on the floor of your shop and see what happens. We cover the leaf and then we glue it on there. As a food preservative, again, the film forming properties of chitosan, we're going to put an invisible shrink wrap is kind of the first thing that happens with this. And then through the antimicrobial properties against the pathogenic microbes that we have in the environment, is going to prevent spoiling or help delay, slow down the spoiling process. It was really kind of blew me away when I learned this little tidbit. The U.S. military, the bandages that we give our troops when we send them in harm's way to go do our dirty work for us, those bandages are infused with chitosan. It is a fantastic fantastic coagulant to help stop bleeding, and due to this property, antimicrobial properties, staves off infection. So if it's good enough for my Army troops, yeah, all right. We actually keep a little bottle. Don't tell anybody I told you this. I keep a little spray bottle or bottle in the shop all the time. just for nicks, burns, scrapes, cuts, whatever. Like I say, your wife takes a pan upside your head. You know how bad your head bleeds? It'll stop, it'll help slow that down very quickly. No, we do. I keep this around the shop just for emergency situations. On the food preservative side of this was a fun dumb little science fair. My daughter, a few years ago, I think she was in the 3rd grade. She's going into junior high now. Wanted in the science fair. Had no idea. There's only one thing in the world that I felt like we could maybe make a science fair experiment out of, and this was it. So if you notice here on the right-hand side in that first slide, or both these slides, on the right-hand side is the untreated. These are the same things. We took one apple, cut it in half, and then quartered it. The strawberries, we just cut 2 strawberries in half. This is the half of everything you see here. When I talk to potato growers, one of the first things they notice is the potato ends sitting there. If you've ever cut a potato and left on the counter, you know how fast that black ring develops once it gets exposed to the atmosphere and starts to oxidize. The first picture here was taken 24 hours after we started this trial, and you can see the difference here in the treated versus the untreated potato. And again, we ran this for 21 days. The picture on the right there is after 21 days. When you start looking at some of the apple dehydrated so quickly on the untreated side, it cracked and split. The strawberries were dramatic. Strawberries just shriveled up on the untreated side. The one effect that we wrote in the hypothesis, going through the scientific method, we expected to see some fruit with some beards on it. And I'm a big advocate of beards. If you can grow it, do it, brother. Put Bic out of business. This is ridiculous at this point. We didn't see any fuzzy growth. We didn't grow anything, which was kind of disappointing and was really puzzling, because it wasn't until we got through with this and we're cleaning up afterwards, and I'm trying to wash my wife's white dish towel here, that I was overcome with this smell of Clorox. And at that point dawned on me that apparently my wife's propensity for brilliant whites probably prevented any mold growth from occurring on the fruit side of this stuff. But anyway, it was fun. We came home with 1st place. We beat the 4th graders that year, so it was a success. Chickpea pathogen test. This test here is what put us in Montana. This was off a very large farm up there. Had a portion of their acres in organic production. The buyer needed more chickpeas. Chickpeas are a hot roll of the dice when it comes to Ascochyta blight, especially for organic production. There's nothing. Like I say, it's up the seeding rate, plant it on the ridges, and hope for the best. This farm, when I got notified of this, sent pictures, and we were behind, way behind, turning yellow already. It was on fire. This farm went in with our 01YS product in combination with a micronutrient package, a 5-way micronutrient package on this, and completely put out the fire. This was one application. They completely put this out. They sent this into Montana State for testing, and out of the 5 organisms that they test for in these germination tests, zeros. There was nothing in here, and came back with a 96% germ rate. This farmer was ecstatic because he now was sitting on a large seed supply for a lot of his neighbors. I have another farmer who, the year prior to me meeting him, had chickpea seed rejected at the seed plant because his Ascochyta levels were too high. So sell it down the road somewhere. He didn't do that. He just took that truckload back home and put it back in the bin. The next spring, I get a phone call that, hey, I've heard XYZ. Told him, I can't tell you that, but yeah, what happens if we seed treat? Don't know. We've never seed treated against Ascochyta for this. He seed treated that infected lot that was so hot, the seed company would not take this. Seed treated that, planted it back on his own farm. A rep from the seed company came personally to his farm to ask him not to do this because he was going to spread so much Ascochyta through this valley, he would wipe out their production. Spotless. He seed treated with this, did one application through the summer, and spotless. Doesn't have a fungicide label on this. I can't tell you that this is a fantastic fungicide, but turns out it's a pretty good fungicide. Why? So the photos on the left, the grain photos, treated on the right, untreated on the left. The picture just below that is the pictures of the roots, the difference in the roots in this. This was something that I started to observe. Like I said, when I began here, I had been playing with some microbial seed treatments and inoculum, trying to figure out what works here. I was just kind of lost in the woods, fumbling around. The first time that we added the O2YS into our protocols, especially on my dryland wheat, this huge expression in root mass, exponential, just mind-blowing. Believe the unbelievable. It was unbelievable, the difference in the root mass that we experienced with this. And I never could quite put my finger on why, what is this doing? How is this going? And then I stumbled across Dr. James White at Rutgers University. Rhizophagy, anybody? Yeah, it's kind of getting to be a little more common term now. He and his team, through, again, the technology that we have today, is quickly becoming a game changer. They have proven now, you can go look this up, Dr. White speaks all over the world on this now. They have proven that your plant is actually an omnivore. It's actually eating whole microbes. Right at that growing root tip, producing the exudates, brings the microbes in, your plant will suck in those entire microbes through that root tip. They have shown through it's an oxidative process, it strips the outer coating off of these microbes and extracts the nutrients out of them. Obviously, some of the microbes die through this process, but many or most of them survive. And they're not sure yet what the trigger is, but at some point your plant gets triggered that it spits these back out. And anywhere it spits them out of the root shaft, you grow a new root hair. Very rapidly, you start to expand the percentage of soil that your root is contacting in here. The other fun part about this that blew me away is they realized that your plant actually has a propensity for fusarium. Some of these pathogens, they have a job in nature to do. They're very good at extracting nutrients. That's kind of their job in nature. The interesting thing about this, if you've got enough of the beneficials there, they basically ride herd on the bad guys. Your bacillus become the cowboys over the bandits. Wild West, lassos, bucking broncos. That's what's going on in here. The fusarium will actually start to behave like the bacillus will. They have a term for it that escapes me at the moment, but they actually control this. Your plant will actually farm microbes. I almost ran off the road the first time that I was hearing about this because it suddenly dawned on me what we're doing. This is one of my, I guess, manifestations of what we're doing to the microbial population. It comes down again, you put good things in, good things come out. As long as you are working, trying to do something to increase your soil health, your biology, you're moving in the right direction. You're getting into this regenerative mode. You can start to regenerate your soils. We're moving in a positive mode. For so many years now, we have benefited in production agriculture from the degradation of our soils. You go do a tillage pass. We all know, if you've ever did this, or I'm sure we've all had exposure to this. You go do a big heavy tillage pass and you see a yield response out of this. So then our thought is, we're going to do more heavy tillage. That yield response happened because you blew that open. You get the oxygen down in the soil profile. Your microbes need oxygen, carbon, nitrogen. If you give them an abundance of any one of those, they're going to go find the other two. Give them an abundance of any two of those, the third one doesn't stand a chance, which is generally your soil carbon. So we put the oxygen in here, we put on a synthetic nitrogen application, poof, things blow up in the soil and your soil carbon suffers because of this. Now you can hold less nitrogen in the soil the next time, and this isn't an acute activity that happens, this is a chronic run that happens. It's so slow and incremental, we didn't realize this is happening until all of a sudden we've got a new disease that we've never had before. Through the regenerative movement that's happening now, you start to learn techniques and processes to reverse this, that your soil starts to improve slowly, incrementally over time. We're building our bank. We start to drought-proof to somewhat our soils. We're able to start storing more nitrogen over the winter. We have less runoff into our streams and our watersheds with this way, so we can slowly keep ramping this up. So would you rather put on a pesticide that's going to aid? We know there's some side effects now with some of our pesticide applications. You want to try to use something that's going to benefit your farm for generations down the road. So we have a really good fit. We have really found a market demand in the regenerative agriculture sphere. A lot of this comes from, we'll go to these conferences, not unsimilar to this one today, and we hear the speaker talk about the dangers of glyphosate and the dangers of fungicides and well, all right, we are not doing that anymore then. When we go home, we're planting cereal rye. There is no more Roundup. We're never spraying fungicides again. And a year from now, you're going to be having a really uncomfortable conversation with your banker. You can't just quit this cold turkey. We kind of have turned our soils into drug addicts. Our soils are junkies in many situations now. So with any drug treatment program, you got to do it slow. It's incremental, it's a lot of counseling, it's a lot of help. Same thing happens with our soils. How long does this take? My experience, 2 to 3 years. I find this, my own experience with my own farms, whatnot, my own farm ground. It was interesting to me, the organic guys, 3 years to transition to organic. There's something to that number. I don't know why, what it is, but that's generally what I see is it's 2 to 3 years to be able to make this transition. You as the farmer don't decide, I'm not putting this on anymore. Your soil plants will tell you we don't need that anymore. There is no point putting on a fungicide if there's no fungal pressure around. There's no point putting on an insecticide if there's no insect pressure around. Your soil will tell you that I just don't need that anymore. But please don't take what I say and go home and we're just going to quit doing all this. We can help you with a lot of this. You don't want to spray a fungicide anymore? Showed you some instances here that we can help you with that. You don't want to spray glyphosate anymore? We're not going to replace glyphosate, but if you mix us with your glyphosate, your efficacy will more closely resemble probably what you experienced back in the 80s, the first time that you used Roundup. There's something to be said here with, when we acidify, we always recommend citric acid. The company now has a citric acid product called Chitosan, has an OMRI certification label on it. Super easy to use. We had a problem out in the West that in the South, apparently they sell citric acid at Shopco. I don't know, like you can get it in, they just go get some citric acid. I can't just go get citric acid out there. The first year we played with this, in fact, went to Sam's Club to get a pallet of vinegar. And that will get you a meeting with the manager, wondering what new meth brewing technique you have come up with that you need this much vinegar. So the Chitosan product, it's really no secret, 100% pure citric acid, is a fantastic water treatment product. There's a conjugate base, the citrate portion of this will work to tie up with the positive charges in your spray solution, your calciums, your magnesiums, your hard water causal agents in there, rectify those, and then it brings the hydrogen to the party to bring the pH down to make the chitosan fluid, to the solubility aspect of the chitosan in the spray tank. So again, pH is critical. The potato picture, this was an interesting one. I had marked out this guy's potatoes that spring. Hey, you want to try some snake oil? And he told me, no, I don't like snake oil. And I told him, well, our snakes are ASS certified by the American Snake Society. They are free range. We only milk them once a day, and it's done so by virgins in white flowing robes while harp music plays gently in the background. And he thought, well, that sounds like some damn good snakes. Let's try it. So we put 1 pint per acre in with his thing at the rest of his mix at Markout. He sent me these pictures, this would have been first part of July. Kind of wanting to know why. What's the difference here? If you look at this, the untreated is a little bit deceiving because the seed piece is still attached there. Look at the difference in the root manifestation of this. This field wound up, the treated side wound up with about, depending, 15, 18 sacks to the acre difference in yield that fall, just from one application. Our products are very safe, very easy to use. Picture here is what I used to do for a living. That's actually my brother in the rain suit PPE gear there to do the fumigants. And I'm here to tell you that suit is really fun to wear in August, September in Idaho. Time we get to October, November it feels pretty good actually. But when the sweat starts to pool in your respirator while you're out trying to work on this and fix on this, the worst part about this is you have to be clean shaven to get the respirator fit test to pass. And this is still just my rebellion from all the years I had to shave to do all of this. But in this picture, we're both treating for nematodes. Our Organisan product is completely sprayable. You can put this through water, you can spray this on. You can spray us on the plant. We will move into the root zone. If we're treating nematodes, I like a broadcast application because those nematodes aren't just living in that root zone. We treat the entire soil profile. And with the potato production in Idaho now, what we have learned here with GDUs and egg layds and population growths and nematodes, that as the soil warms up, microbial or the nematode population starts to take off. We will start with an application in furrow at planting, and then it's about 6 weeks later we will follow that up. And by this time of year now, we're treating every 2 weeks to stay on top of these egg lays and keep that population suppressed down. I'm not going to tell you this story, but I will actually stick my finger in a jug once in a while and lick it off just to show a concerned customer how safe this product is. Turns out it puts hair on your face, but that's the only side effect I've found to it so far. This picture was taken by Mr. Nichols on a customer's farm in North Florida. This was a viral infection that occurred in these tomatoes. There was no cure for it. The university told them to do your neighbors a favor, disc this under before the infection spreads anymore. They had nothing to lose, and we find ourselves in these situations so many times that we get invited on because there's nothing left to lose at this point, buddy. Let's see what your snake oil can do. Went on here, this wasn't a one-time treat and done. This was a heavy repeated application once a week with the salicylic acid product in combination with this. The difference here, the road splits these two blocks, treated, untreated. Pretty easy to see which one's treated, untreated. Full yield. They had a full yield on the side that they had treated. We're kind of kicking themselves that we hadn't expanded the test plot a little bit bigger than what we did. Tomato prices were sky high that year because this infection, again, just showed up in a year and ravaged this region. Tomatoes were in short supply, demand was up, as was yield. They were pretty happy with what they treated, pretty disappointed they didn't treat more of them. This is off a very large colony in Montana. You can see here in the bottom picture, this is the gentleman's grandson standing out here in this field. You can see the difference in the growth here. This again was a combination with the micronutrient package, and you can see the effect that we had on this barley hay crop. As a seed treatment, this picture you can see here, so what you're looking at on the left, these soybeans were treated with Chitosan. On the right is untreated. Count the beans in the dish. It's the same number of soybeans in each dish. Look at the root proliferation difference in this. Again, the hormonal properties, everything that goes on with this. An interesting thing happens here we have learned with soybeans. You look at the bottom pictures there on the left, that is a cross section. Took a soybean, cut it in half, and you're looking at the cut side of this. Notice how that membrane is filled in versus the one on the right. You can see the open cracks and fissures in this. It imbibes through the seed coat into the actual seed germ. With soybeans, if it happens to be a moderately dry spring when they're planting, you wind up with erratic plant emergence versus the swells over the ridges. This will actually work to somewhat create a semi-osmotic atmosphere within that seed piece to where it allows moisture in, but it won't allow a dry soil to wick the moisture back out of that. So we've had reports of guys who were very impressed with the evenness of their seed emergence. I'm not going to tell you that's going to make your soybean crop. It's still got to rain. We're just going to help you get germinated and up and going. Mother Nature always bats last. One caveat with the seed treatment though, we have to go on first. If your seed has been synthetically treated, remember when I talked about how good chitosan is at moving things and sticking things? We actually have the ability to take that synthetic treatment into the inside of that seed piece. And you don't want that. We've had situations where we have seen a big reduction in seed germination. So I realize sometimes it's tough to pick up naked seed or this, that, the other, but there are companies that we are working with who are figuring out that will be employing this to put us on first, two-stage treater, put us on first. They will put the synthetic on over top of that if you still desire this synthetic. But keep that in mind. Again, don't just go home and remember that I said this was a good seed treatment product, because it can have again, those phone calls cause me to lose sleep, and then I get grumpy, and then my wife threatens to divorce me, and I'll never see my beautiful kids again, so please pay attention. The microbial response with this, the microbiometer, this has been one of the most fantastic devices I have ever, it's fantastic. We will, a lot of times when we get onto farms, we're splitting fields. We're doing test strips, we're splitting pivots in half. And when I can go out in a potato field in the middle of the summer with a farmer in Idaho, and they're doing their conventional treatment on this side, and we're doing our treatment on this side, and we can go out and take a soil sample that's no more than 20 feet apart, take them back to the tailgate of the pickup, sift this out, go through the little process from beginning to end. 30 minutes. If you walk with a cane, you can have a numerical value on your smartphone for what your microbial population is. This is actually their old test. There's 13 patents, I think, associated with this device at this point. They'll give you fungal to bacterial ratio in this. When you as a farmer can look at this and suddenly see the difference in your microbial population between where we're doing this versus a synthetic treatment, that's a big aha moment. You can't deny this anymore. It's so difficult to quantify. We never think about what we do to our microbe population in the soil because we can't see them. We don't know what's going on until we get a white mold outbreak, and then it's too late. Boy, we got a long ways to back up the super bee. And super bees are way easier than an A-train, but it's really tough to back up still. Fantastic. One treatment on this. This was our first treatment the first year on this farm for nematode control. A 61% increase in the microbial biomass score with one treatment. That's how dramatic this can be when we put the right food source in with the right population. Go look them up. Microbiometer. I always travel with that and a refractometer because bricks is a really quick snapshot of what you're doing. You want to see if I'm full of it, if our products are worth their weight or not. You're going to make an application. Go out and take a bricks reading for a couple of mornings before you do this. Bricks will change throughout the day, day to day. Go do a few of these a few days before the treatment. Put the treatment on, go out the same time of day, take a few of these after the treatment and see what happened to your bricks level. Again, this movement that we're able to help facilitate of moving the micronutrients, everything into the plant, through the plant. Once your plant has those, she knows what to do with them. So, pink rot, Phytophthora erythroseptica. Phytophthora is another one of these interesting organisms. Horrible pathogen, Fusarium. It has a job in nature to do. Phytophthora is fantastic at tearing things apart. It's what it does to your potatoes. It tears them apart, rots them in the field. Really interesting, to me anyway, situation. I was at a kind of a microbial conference in California a while back. One of the speakers there, I posed the question to him. In my years of fumigation, I used to ask the reps, aren't we killing everything in the soil with this? And their response was always, well, yeah, but the good guys will come back faster without the competition. Never bought this. So I asked this guy, he grows bacteria, he does biology. I told him this scenario. And his response to me was that I've never looked at that exact scenario before, but I can tell you in a situation like that where you fill a void, Phytophthora will probably be the first organism that comes back in on this. Again, back to this reductionist attitude in agriculture, we were treating our nematode problem, and I'll go out on a limb and tell you that that nematode problem, steps down the road, has created our Phytophthora problem. If you have a biological situation, biological problem in your field, it's because you have a biological problem. It's not that you have too many of the bad guys, it's that you don't have enough of the good guys to combat that. They're fighting for space in there. Stress event, June 18th in East Ohio, had a little hailstorm. You know pink rot's coming for you when you see a situation like this. Came through it scot-free. It was unbelievable, actually. June 10th, same field. This field had everything in the world thrown at it. You can see the difference here dramatically between the untreated on the right, treated on the left. This was 1 quart per acre in furrow at planting around the 1st of May. The 10th of June, we got down to 24 degrees for 3.5, 4 hours. I got the phone call from the farmer that I should come look at this because this is unbelievable. So I did. Farmers never call me with good news. Y'all call me with a problem. If it works, feel free to call and let me know that because that makes me sleep better. I promise we're not going to ramp up the price on you next year just because you told us it works. So give me a good one once in a while too. We went out and just took average digs on treated, untreated. I didn't pick the biggest one over here and the worst one over here. Those are just the averages you see from each side of the field. There was one day, at the most, there was 2 days difference in planting time, same variety, same soil type, same everything. There you go. Big, the frost stuff again can be a really big thing. Stripe rust, again, not a fungicide, not gonna tell you we're a fungicide. We are awesome on stripe rust though. This is one of my favorite ones to go after. You will be able to come back in 24 hours and see where the airplane missed. He left a bee on the end, you're still gonna find those orange spores there. In 24 hours, we dry up stripe rust. It actually is really fun. Longleaf pine. This is from a very big tree outfit in southern Georgia. They were seed treating with this, and they started incorporating us into, they go through this scarifying process, I think they call it. I don't grow a lot of pine trees where I'm at in the desert of Idaho. But they actually have to freeze or chill the seeds, and they have this whole process that they go through to get them to go do their thing when they plant them. They were just putting some O2YS in their water that they were soaking these trees in, and then put them all in their pots. And I met these guys. I got to have a conversation with them when I was in Georgia. They always put 2 seeds in every cup because they don't want an empty cup anywhere. And the germination rate is 40, 50 some odd percent normally. We took their germination thing to low 90s with this. The funny thing they were telling me was it was too much of a good thing in some circumstances. It cost them an extra $13,000 in hand labor to go through all of these cups and pull one tree out and put in its own cup because the germination was so much better. By this point in the growth of the tree, you can see these were planted at the same time. You can see the difference in the stem. This is what they're really interested in, is how fast, how much bigger we can grow a trunk, how much more quickly. See the difference in the root manifestation again. This rhizophagy thing carries on throughout the plant life. Do I need to come back and re-inoculate? Yeah, I'm a big advocate of microbial inputs. Now, I'm not scared about introducing something that's not native in my soil. The natives will take care of it if it shouldn't be there. Big fan of microbial inputs. On the right, if anybody's in the compost business, I'm going to give you a really quick cheat on this to set your product apart from your competitor's product. It's a little bit tough to see sometimes. You can see it okay. Celery on the right, they knew that this was going to be a 4 ton or 6 ton to the acre spread of poultry litter. So what they did is by the time you get to the end of the compost process through they tell me it's simple math, but none of that was ever simple to me. It's pretty easy to calculate how much volume you have in a windrow. So in their last turn, they just impregnated 1 pint per acre in every 4 tons of the compost. We know this is a 4 ton spread. We want to put out 1 pint per acre. Didn't tell the customer what they had done. their products on the right side of the road, customers' competitive product on the left side of the road. And celery, they're after that bushy top. That's one of the, again, the visual thing. Yeah, to the line, you could see the difference where they had impregnated this. They told us that it was kind of unbelievable, the difference that we saw between treated and untreated. Golf courses, as anybody I work with will tell you, I love golf courses. However, they look like a really big waste of awesome grazing opportunity to me. Like we could run a lot of cattle on those. This is off a golf course in southern Florida that got to the point they shut the golf course down, tore it up, and reseeded it because the nematodes, they quit. Backed up, reseeded. We got involved on this golf course during the reseeding process and started treating with the Nemasan and the O2YS products. This golf course opened, from when they seeded, they had an established or estimated opening date. They opened several weeks earlier because of the germination, the way that the grass came in. These guys got going on, I think bi-monthly, every 2 weeks, they do a Nemasan application with this for the nematodes. Nothing but happy. This situation here is kind of what put us on the radar with the really high-end golf courses all over the South at this point. So lawn care, yard care, golf courses, turf, really our two fastest growing market segments within our company anymore have become the turf realm and this regenerative agriculture realm, because we bring so much to this. Even in the golf courses, it's interesting that these high-end private clubs have an unlimited budget to put on whatever they want. Their patrons are demanding that they quit using some of these harsh chemistries. If you're bringing your kids with you, your dog with you, whatever to the golf course, you're putting your golf tee in your mouth, like everybody's becoming more conscious, more aware of this. And we have been able to step in and completely fill that need for them. The Chitosan, again, the pH is critical. This product is so easy to use. In the 5-gallon bucket, there is 40 14-ounce foil packets. Once you get this figured out, you just know for a 1,200-gallon sprayer load, it takes 2 packets. It takes 4 packets. I'm going to tell you right now, you have to open the packets though. Again, I don't like disappointed, angry farmers when they call me and they put in half a bucket now and they haven't moved the pH at all. The farmers' guys were accustomed to the dissolvable packs, and nobody explained to them that you actually have to open these and dump them in. So just keep that in the back of your mind. You're going to have to open it and pour it in manually. So that's it for me. Here's our phone numbers, contact information. Feel free to reach out to any of us anytime, day or night. I'm not a morning person, but you're welcome to try. Anytime. So, all right, thank y'all.